we've seen come out of the Obama administration is a stimulus package, $787 billion unpaid for. We saw these supplemental, emergency supplementals, which are then not paid for, which has accumulated that our national debt just went over $13 trillion. $13 trillion. Our debt this year will be $1.4 trillion. Next year, $1.5 trillion. Numbers are staggering. Mitt, my favorite bumper sticker lately says, "Please do not tell President Obama what comes after a trillion." So what's the latest news, very briefly, and I'm sure you may have seen it. The nation's economy added 431,000 jobs, and the unemployment rate dipped to 9.7%. The government said that 411 of the jobs created, 411 of the 431,000, were temporary positions with the once-a-decade U.S. Census, and not the kind of unemployment that can drive a sustained economic recovery. That meant that the overall private sector employment growth for the month was up by just 41,000, and the number of long-term unemployed, that's people who have been out of work for 27 weeks or longer, remained the same as the month before at 6.8 million. My friends, here we've not passed this $1 trillion stimulus package when you look at the interest, these omnibus appropriations bills loaded down with thousands and thousands of earmarks, this accumulated debt, and here we are with 9.7% unemployment. You might remember when we had the so-called stimulus package that they said that unemployment maximum would be 8%. It's now 9.7. I just want to mention one other issue that obviously is dominating our conversation, and that is the issue of immigration. We have to secure our borders. We have to secure our borders first. We can. John Kyle and I have a 10-point plan to secure the borders. I thought that the president's announcement of 1,200 National Guard to the border was a good first step. Now we are being told, not directly, but hearing that they're going to be desk jobs. Can't be desk jobs. We need surveillance. We need 3,000 additional National Guard to the border. We need to train 3,000 National Border Patrol, and we need to make greater use of the UAVs. We need to finish the fence. And my friends, it is a shame that Phoenix, Arizona is now #2 as far as the kidnapping capital of the world. That is unacceptable. That is unacceptable. And we have to secure our border, and we have to get the border secured first. And I'd be glad to talk more about that with you. And we can do it, my friends. In San Diego, they've done a much better job. In parts of Texas, they can do a much better job. But I would hope also, and I'll stop with this, I would also hope that those people who want to boycott Arizona would stop. It's disgraceful. It will hurt our population and our Hispanic population. And second of all, I might ask the President of the United States, I hope that Governor Brewer did yesterday, that maybe the Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security might read the bill. Read the bill. Yeah. So with that, Mitt and I would like to respond to any questions or comments. We have people with microphones. If you just raise your hand or stand up, we'll be glad to respond. Can we start with this lady down here in the first row? And there we are. Yes, ma'am. If you'll just stand up and take the microphone. And
good afternoon. I am concerned on getting help to the border. What can we, as Americans that live in Arizona, do to help you to get what you need to secure the border?
Speak up. Americans are speaking up all over. People of this country, according to polls, depending on how the question is asked, 60, 70, 80% of the American people support what we did in Arizona. understand that the reason why the legislature and the governor acted, I think Kirk Adams will tell you, is because of the failure of the federal government to fulfill its responsibilities. It's a federal responsibility to secure our borders and speak up. And by the way, call all your friends that live outside of the state of Arizona. Say, if you had plans to go to LA, come on to Arizona instead. I mean, come on to Arizona, show your support, and we'd love to show. We would love to show you our beautiful state. We'd like to take you to the superstitions. We'd love for you to go to the Grand Canyon. We'd love for you to see some of the beautiful resorts we have here in our state. And we want you to come here and show your solidarity with us because it is, as you say, a national security issue. A lot of the people that are being smuggled up now, not a lot, but some of the people who are being smuggled up across our southern border are not just from our hemisphere. They're coming from all over the world. If we don't have a secure border, we might have a serious national security issue over time. So keep being active, keep talking to your friends, keep explaining to your friends that the liberal media is not portraying the bill in an honest and truthful fashion that was passed by the Arizona legislature.
Senator, I'm concerned about all of the issues you spoke about, but I'm more concerned about the shredding of our Constitution by this president.
I believe, and I'd like Mitt's comments on this, that this is an administration that is governing from the far left, and America is a right-of-center nation. Who thought a year and a half ago that we would own General Motors and Chrysler? Who thought that we would own GMAC? Who thought that they would bail out the Wall Street financial institutions? Meanwhile, our community banks here in Arizona are in deep and serious trouble. Who thought that we would pass a law called Obamacare that would mandate that citizens purchase a certain product, the ingredients of that product are dictated by the government, and they'll fine you if you don't comply with that. That, in my view, is not in keeping with the Constitution, and I believe these challenges to Obamacare have every good chance of succeeding.
It's really hard to understand how this president could be as misguided as he has been. From a foreign policy standpoint, he went around the world and apologized for America. America, the land that has helped bring billions of people out of poverty by virtue of our free enterprise system being adopted around the world. America, where our sons and daughters laid down their lives to bring freedom to other people. No other nation has done more to help bring freedom and prosperity to others in America. And here at home, this president has made so many serious errors that have hurt so many people in terms of their employment, for instance, that it's hard to calculate. You know, who would have imagined we'd ever look back at the Jimmy Carter years as the good old days? This president continues to in many respects, do what he thinks is right, regardless of whether it follows the construction and the demands of the Constitution. I thought, for instance, those who happened to read the paper this morning, there's an op-ed by Mitch Daniels, the governor of Indiana, that talks about how when General Motors went into bankruptcy, instead of following the normal bankruptcy process where secured creditors are taken care of first, no, he instead did a favor for his friends in the union and gave them a big ownership slug in General Motors, despite the rules of investments and capital in this country. This kind of shredding of our laws and our processes and of our constitutional rights will not sit well with the American people. And that's why I'm convinced that you're going to see more Republicans elected this November, including this man, and I'm convinced that you're going to see a Republican president in 2012.
Could I add one more point to your point? This czar's issue. I mean, the Constitution says that nominees of the president or people who are appointed to certain key positions in government should have the advice and consent of the United States Senate. Now these czars are being appointed, bypassing the confirmation process in the United States Senate. In my view, that is certainly a violation of the spirit of the Constitution, if not the letter. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. I want to ask you a rather controversial question regarding amnesty. Now, I am Hispanic, I'm a native Arizonan, fine and dandy. Here's my question. It just appears that this issue is such a political hot button, and many people in America are against amnesty because you are rewarding 12 million lawbreakers, and it's going to bankrupt the country. And I know it's just so controversial. It seems like the politicians have to have amnesty because it's so political, and I don't believe America wants to reward 12 million lawbreakers. I would like you to comment on that.
First, before we address that, and this is where there's strong disagreement between Mitt and me and our governor and the people of Arizona and the President of the United States, is we have to get the border secured first. And we can do that, and in my view, in a relatively short period of time. And I mentioned before, over in San Diego, the situation has improved dramatically. In parts of Texas, it has too, which, by the way, has added to the funnel effect in Arizona. So first, you got to get the border secured first. We're going to have to address the issue of people who are here illegally. The problem will be dramatically lessened if part of immigration reform, when we get to it, calls for the prosecution of people who employ people who are in this country illegally. That will have a very salutary effect, because if people are not hired, then they may, many of them voluntarily will return to the country that they came from. The second aspect of this issue is they're not the same. Some people may have been here for a long, long time and been good citizens since they got here, etc. And maybe we ought to look at fines, back of the line, green card, etc., etc. But someone, well, let me just give you an example. 17% of the people who we are apprehending crossing the Tucson sector border have committed serious crimes in this country already. And by the way, this program called Streamline, where we incarcerate repeat crossers for 15, 30, 60, 90 days, has had a very beneficial effect, and it needs to be funded. But one of the ideas that I think we ought to kick around on this issue is to have people, what we call touchback, go back to the country they came from and go through a background check, go through the regular process, get in line behind everybody else, and so that all over the world everybody can be treated equally who want to come to our country. Now, and I know, and I'm sorry, Mitt, for this long answer, but we cherish our Hispanic heritage in Arizona, and anybody that thinks we don't does not know Arizona. Spanish was spoken before English in Arizona. We are enriched by our Hispanic heritage, and we want Hispanics in our state, but we want them to come legally.
I'm an employer of 300 people here in Arizona and in other states, and all of them are American, by the way, and all of them have great insurance, but that's beside the point. I'm a little bit concerned about cap and trade. I'm a little bit concerned about the idea that I find the conservative movement always on the reactive stance of the environmental movement. I feel like we're always playing defense in this thing, and I'm a little bit worried about the oil issue in the Gulf, that it's going to cause some sort of a synergy, and that there's going to get some inertia going, and then we're going to have some taxes on our energy that we don't really want long term. And I wanted to just address this to the senator and see what we have to say.
He addressed it to you. Come on, that's this is the guy running for Senate.
I think we need Mitt's views on cap and trade, because it's clearly a national issue. Let me just say that we all want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I don't know anybody that wants them to grow. But the fact is, cap and trade is not cap and trade, it's cap and tax. And we don't need an increase in taxes when the economy is what it is. Yesterday I was out at Palo Verde nuclear plant. I hope that on one of your visits, and Mitt will be back to Arizona, I promise you, in the future, I'd like to take you out to our nuclear power plant out there. It was the last one completed in America. It's clean energy, it's inexpensive energy, and if we're ever going to achieve oil independence, it's going to be through nuclear power. India and China are moving quickly with the construction of nuclear power plants. And what's the problem with this administration? There's no place to store. They closed Yucca Mountain just because Harry Reid wanted it closed after spending $17 billion of taxpayers' money, on ratepayers' money on Yucca Mountain, and there's no place to recycle spent nuclear fuel. The British, the French, and the Japanese all recycle their spent nuclear fuel. So we're proactive. We're proactive in behalf of a robust nuclear power program in the United States of America. Good.
I will. I'll only support what the senator indicates, and that is that this is not just an economic issue, but that certainly is what hits us in the face every day, as we know how much our economy is sending outside of America to go to other people. Instead of employing Americans, employing people around the world who are selling us oil. We spend hundreds of billions of dollars a year buying energy from elsewhere, and that money could be spent here instead. And so having our own sources of oil, gas, my goodness, natural gas. The natural gas resources in this country have just expanded dramatically with new technology. Horizontal drilling technology in shale is bringing out all sorts of gas, would allow us to have our energy supplies from gas dramatically increased. We have, of course, nuclear power. It is an enormous potential for us and is obviously driving economies in other parts of the world. We can create more energy sources in our own nation. And number two, we need to create incentives for people to look for those new uses of energy, or more efficient use of energy, rather. And I happen to think that cap and trade, particularly as it was passed in the legislation in Washington, was not the right way to go. I've written a book. You may have seen it. If you haven't, please buy 100 copies. It's called No Apology, The Case for American Greatness, and I have a chapter on energy independence and lay out what things I think we ought to do to encourage our citizens to be efficient in our use of energy and to create more energy resources. But I will say this. I said it started off as an economic issue, sending hundreds of billions of dollars out of our economy. But don't forget also that it's an issue that affects our lives as well, because purchasing energy outside this country is financing a lot of very bad actions around the world. And some of those actions are affecting us and our safety here in this country. Becoming an energy independent nation is an essential priority. We keep talking about it and talking about it. I think it's time to stop the talk and actually do the work necessary to get America energy independent. Thanks.
But my comment is, every night I watch the news, somebody says, oh, that's unconstitutional, that's unconstitutional. Well, who can do to correct the Constitution being voided? Our president took an oath of office. He goes all over the country and talking about world government. That certainly isn't in our Constitution. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the advice, and I appreciate it. Let me say that Americans want us to get something done. And I think this gentleman to my right, who was elected governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts with an overwhelming majority of Democrats, was able to do what we have to do: preserve principle, and never betray principle, but at the same time be willing to work across the aisle. So the list of legislative accomplishments that Governor Romney was able to achieve in Massachusetts with an overwhelming Democratic majority, I think is an object lesson that you can preserve principle and yet still serve the people who put you in office. And I don't, again, if there's ever a non-conservative legislature, I would argue the People's Republic of Massachusetts is probably it. But so I do think they want us to work together, but to preserve principle. And sometimes, I will agree with you, sometimes you get in a room and you start negotiating and all of a sudden you find yourself compromising principles, and we cannot do that. So I think that's a very legitimate point. The second thing is that I think that again, that it's very difficult. People are saying that I have become more conservative, further right, changed positions, etc. Every administration I've dealt with, Republican and Democrat, we've had an opportunity to sit down across the table and try to achieve a result. This administration's never done that. They've never done it once. They're governing from the far left. And America's a right-of-center nation. So has there ever been any outreach to me or other Republican members of the United States Senate? No, there hasn't been. So I haven't changed. I'm still a proud conservative. But there's never been, this administration, when it came to power, decided they had 60 votes in the Senate, thanks to Specter the defector, and that they had an overwhelming majority in the House, and they would ram things through. They rammed through the stimulus package. They rammed through an omnibus appropriations bill with 9,000 earmarks on it. They rammed through all these big spending bills that have given us a $1.4 trillion deficit this year. So I'll continue to fight for the things I believe in, and I'll be glad to sit down with the other side, not compromising principle, but at the same time, you've got to have some kind of a willingness to do that if you're going to achieve any results. So I'll continue to stand up for the conservative principles I believe in, and I also believe that the role model that Mitt and I have is one Ronald Reagan, who stood up for what he believed in and fought for what he believed in. But there were times when he sat down across the table from Tip O'Neill, the liberal Speaker of the House of Representatives from Massachusetts, in order for the betterment of the American people. Mitt, you want to comment?
Yeah, I'll just say this, which is I found, and you won't be surprised by this, but I came from a state that, as the senator indicated, was slightly Democrat. My legislature had 160 state reps, for instance. When I became governor, I believe 21 of 160 were Republican. My Senate had 40 members. Of the 40 members, we had 5 that were Republican. All right, so I was kind of outnumbered. But I actually found out that among my Democratic friends, and this is true around the country, there are a lot of folks who love the country and love the country first. And we disagree on issues. I remember battling with Senator Kennedy. Ted Kennedy and I disagreed on almost every issue. But you know, I fundamentally believe he loves the country, loved the country when he was alive. And we were able to work together on a few things where we saw eye to eye because the country came first. There are some good people who put the country first and who believe in the Constitution and in the principles that made America, America. Among Democrats and Republicans that share those views, we can get things done. What I'm concerned about right now is that in Washington, we have a lot of liberals who have an entirely different view of America than we have, an entirely different view of our Constitution. And it's very difficult to sit down and talk with them. It's very difficult to find common ground with the Obama administration on the kinds of issues that they're bringing up time and time again. For instance, the Employees Free Choice Act, this card check program. These principles are so far from our own, there's no common ground where that exists. But our job is to make sure that great men and women on both sides of the aisle come together to put America first and to keep America, America, welcoming those principles and those people that will keep us strong.
Could I say thank you for coming today?